Hello, this is Christian. Welcome to Angular. In this third video of the series, we created the table here last time. We completed and we populated the data from a JSON data file, and we have the data shown here in the table. We also added a function to display basically just the delete ID for each of these flight numbers here to the console. So now we're going to refactor this a little bit further and make it a little bit more convenient or more actually efficient. So here on the IDE, I'm going to go to Angular, go to src, app. Okay, so you notice that inside here we have a couple of folders. We have the models that contains our data. We have a nav for the nav component, and we have the footer for the footer component. So if you want to add more components, you keep adding here. Now the more folders you had, it's gonna be looking like a little bit confusing. So what you want to do is you want to create another folder called components and put all your components in that directory so that they kind of make sense, right? You have your models here, your component, and other, like services and other data, other things as well. So let's just do something like that, okay? So I'm going to go and create a folder here. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit differently. Okay, I'm going to go, and before we do that though, I'm going to show you how to do inside the CLI. But first, we're going to refactor this page here. So last time we created this table here inside the app component HTML, which is the root component. And so you don't want to put everything here in the root component because it's going to be very, very cluttered. And you want to refactor that. So you move all these components out into their own component like we did with the navigation. As you can see, we have the app nav here. And then the very bottom, we have the footer and things like that, right? So this whole thing, this whole container should be, you know, built into another component, and we'll just put them here. Maybe we'll call it like flight list. Okay, so we put that inside its own component, and we'll just put it here. All right, so let's do that, and I'm gonna go to the terminal and navigate to the Angular Flight app. All right, so here I'm gonna use the CLI to generate a component inside a components directory. So I'm going to use the ng and then G for generate, C for component, then directory. The directory is going to be called components. Inside the components now, I'm going to have a new component called flight-list. Okay, and then I don't want the style sheet, and I don't want the test either, so skip test. Okay, so let it run, and it will generate that for us, and it will create that directory components automatically for us also. Here we go. We got that. All right, so this is good to go. I'm going to go and run the app for now. And while that's running, and I can close it now. We'll check it back later. And so right now, my add module is linking to the flight list component we just created, as you can see in the components now. So now I'm going to move the nav and the footer mod components into the components directory and folder as well. Okay, but let's check the app first to make sure it's functioning. Hopefully there are no errors. And well, I need to probably check to make sure it's actually compiled correctly. Okay, still doing that. Almost done. Okay, we're good. So let's go back and see. All right, so press F12 and see if the data is been displayed. Yep, so ID 2, ID 5 looks good. Okay, so now let's go back, and then we're going to move these two components into here. So I'm going to just drag the footer and see if it lets me do that. I'm going to click and drag into the components. I'm sure did it do it? Yeah, I think it did, right? No. Try again. Okay, I think it's inside now. Yep, and you can do a nav as well. It's kind of tricky, so you click it and then you do it again. Then do it. All right, so both are in there now. And then notice when I did that, it actually automatically updated the modules for me. If it didn't update automatically for you, just make sure you go to the add modules and link it to the correct place, okay? So otherwise you won't find your module, it won't work. So this one is done. We don't need to touch this anymore. Now, so as you can see, it's much cleaner. Okay, so now in the app component.ts, so everything here stays the same. We're going to do a little bit different here. I'm going to move this function to the flight list component, and when we learn about services and so on, we're going to come back and put some function back in here, and so we'll let the child component call this function and do the deletion. But for now, just so that we understand how things works, I'm going to move this into the child component. Okay, so I'm going to just cut it out and open the components directory into the flights component and add it right in here, right after the init here. Okay, that stays in there now. And then now I need to go to the add component HTML, and we need to move everything here down. So like maybe line 7 all the way down to line 44. Okay, so I'm going to just copy everything here, cut it out, and paste it into the flight component HTML template. So just paste and replace everything here with that. And we'll come back here, we'll make some changes in here a little bit. Just save it first before we forget. And then now in its place, we are going to add in here the child component, which is the app flight list. Okay, just like we did with the footer and the navigation here. Now this is a child component. I'll just put some spaces you can see. So the add component source file, we need to pass this data called flightData down to the child component. Okay, and to do that, you just have to do a binding, and this is how you do it. So make sure this is the flightData we need to pass to. So app component HTML right here, and the opening part of the tag, we're going to bind to a variable inside the child class right in here, and then that is going to be assigned to this flight data. Okay, this flight data property is the one inside the add component, which is the component of this HTML right here. Okay, so then we're going to pass that to a variable inside the child component, and we're going to call it something else. So I'll call it flights. Okay, it doesn't exist yet because it's not found. So I'll call it flights. Let me just save it now. And then now I'm going to go to the child component HTML, template, the source file, this one. And then here, to receive data from a parent component, you have to use a special decorator called input with the at in front, like this decorator, like add component, add module, and so on. So this is going to be called add input. It's a function. And then you need to, so you decorate a variable called flights. We call it flights, right? And I can make that flights to be an empty string or empty or list. And if it's like has a red line here, it just means you need to import it. If it doesn't happen automatically, sometimes it does. If it doesn't, then you just have to go into the input up here and just add in the input. Okay. So now it receives the input to a variable called flights coming from a parent component. It does not know which parent it is. It could be anybody, right? So now everything is like a black box. You don't know what's coming, but you know that you have some kind of input coming in. Okay. So the parent, however, has to know what's inside here, what's available to receive the data. That's why we called it flights. So this have to match whatever is inside the app flight list component. And the data we feed through to this object or property here. And then this property then will be fed to this template. So in the app, flight list component HTML. Now this stays pretty much the same except for this data here is no longer called flight data. We call it flights. Okay, so for every flight of flights, then the things remains the same. The function here is, this is why I moved it to the app flight list components, because this function will do the deletion for us. Okay, so I move into the local component, which is in here now, and it will still log the data from here. and the parent component doesn't have any more. Okay, we removed that. Okay, so as you can see, all things are looking good here. No red marks everywhere, nothing so far. And if you go to the browser and refresh and run again, hopefully everything will still works just as it was before so far. Press F12 and let's have a look. Yay! So as you can see, it's still working just like before, and no problem at all. Okay, so this is how I would recommend you to do, is to refactor every time. So again, we are doing a top-down approach, right? Remember, we are going from the large, really complex component, and in this case, the app component, and we break it down into smaller components or subcomponents, so that each file has their own leaner code to look at, to maintain, so we can easily debug much later. So now every piece is like very lean now. Okay, and for now it's okay, because later on we will learn about routing. We probably not going to need this anymore. We do a different way of passing data down to a child component through what's called services or dependency injection. And when we get there, then the data here will actually be fed through this router outlet here. That's why I leave it here for now. So when you navigate to a different page, the data will be displayed here instead of having a child component like this. But for now, this is good. So again, just to recap, we refactor this, we moved the function down to the child component, we added this, we passed this data to the child component through a special attribute called with the bracket here, square bracket, and the flights. This flight variable here is a variable you set inside a child component that should receive the input. Okay, you must have this decorator. If you don't have it, it's not going to work. So if I, for example, if I comment that out like this, okay, if I do that, you see a bunch of red dots everywhere now, because now this one, it says, hey, there is no recipient for this. I cannot find it, right? So it won't work. And so you must have this to receive that data. And you see that sometimes you put code in here. I mean, just just not to confuse you when you see something like this. Okay, it's the same thing. Okay, but if your data gets really long, then you put into a new line. But you can also do this. It's fine if that's easier to see. Makes your code a little bit shorter. That's okay too. Okay, so I think that's it for this one, and we are good to go. So thank you. If you have any questions, again, just put a comment or send me an email.